This is the hospital. Your ex-wife is in labor. A very critical condition.
The phone vibrated against Kang Min-ho's chest just as the officiant asked, "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" 200 guests held their breath. His bride, Song Ji-eun, smiled beneath her veil. Min-ho reached into his jacket, protocol be damned, and saw Seoul General Hospital flashing on the screen. His assistant's panicked voice cut through. "Sir, Serena John is in the emergency wing. She's in labor. Critical condition. The baby." His hand went numb. "She's been trying to reach you for hours. Sir, you're listed as the father. 8 months. He'd divorced her 8 months ago, walked away to protect her from his world, convinced himself she'd be safer without him. She'd never told him, never said a word. And now she was giving birth to his child, while he stood at an altar promising forever to someone else." His eyes found his mother in the front row, her expression sharp with warning. Found his bride's father, the man whose business merger depended on this marriage. Found the 200 people whose expectations were chains around his neck. Then he thought of Serena, alone and in pain, bringing his child into the world without him. The choice should have been impossible. It wasn't. Welcome to K Fairy Tales Stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. Min-ho's hand dropped from the phone. Every eye in the cathedral was on him, waiting for the answer that would seal his fate. Ji-eun's smile was starting to waver beneath her veil, confusion creeping into her posture. The officiant cleared his throat, preparing to repeat the question. Then Min-ho turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying with the absolute authority of a man who'd built an empire on decisive action. "I can't do this." The words detonated like a bomb in the sacred silence. Ji-eun gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. His mother stood abruptly, fury painting her elegant features. But Min-ho was already moving, striding down the aisle with purpose, his phone pressed to his ear. "Get me a car at the south entrance." Now, his security team scrambled into action as 200 guests erupted into shocked whispers. By the time he reached the cathedral doors, his mother had caught up to him, her heels clicking sharply against marble. "Min-ho, what are you doing? You'll destroy everything we've built." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "She's having my baby," he said simply, shrugging out of his tuxedo jacket. "I should have been there from the beginning. That woman is not suitable for this family." "I don't care," he interrupted, his eyes blazing with something his mother had never seen before. "I love her. I've always loved her. And I'm not losing her again because I was too much of a coward to choose her." He pushed through the doors into Seoul's afternoon sunlight, leaving behind a cathedral full of scandal and a bride standing alone at an altar. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Kang Min-ho felt like he could finally breathe. The drive to Seoul General Hospital took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Min-ho sat in the back of his car, still wearing his tuxedo pants and dress shirt, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. His mind raced with questions that had no answers. Why hadn't she told him? How long had she known? Was she okay? Was the baby okay? His assistant's voice echoed in his memory. Critical condition. Those 2 words made his chest tight with fear he'd never experienced. Not in boardrooms facing hostile takeovers, not in negotiations with dangerous men, not even when his father had died and left him an empire at 25. This was different. This was Serena, the woman who'd somehow become the center of his universe without him realizing it until he'd already pushed her away. 8 months ago, he'd convinced himself the divorce was necessary. Serena had been receiving threats, photos of her daily routine appearing on his desk with messages that made his blood run cold. Someone in his business world had decided she was a weakness to exploit, a vulnerability in the armor of Seoul's most ruthless CEO. Min-ho had run the calculations like he ran everything else in his life. Option 1, increase security and paint a bigger target on her back. Option 2, remove her from the equation entirely, make her irrelevant to anyone trying to hurt him through her. He'd chosen option 2. He'd filed for divorce, kept his reasons vague, and watched her sign the papers with tears streaming down her beautiful face. She'd asked him if there was someone else, if he'd stopped loving her, if she'd done something wrong. He'd said nothing. Let her believe the worst, because the truth would have terrified her more. What he hadn't anticipated was how much the divorce would destroy him too. For weeks after, he'd driven past her apartment at night, just to see her lights on and know she was safe. He'd had security watching her without her knowledge, tracking her movements, ensuring no one got close enough to harm her. He'd been protecting her from a distance, loving her in secret, dying slowly without her presence in his life. And she'd been pregnant the entire time, carrying his child, facing everything alone because he'd been too proud to explain why he'd really left. The realization made him want to put his fist through something, preferably his own face for being such an idiot. When the car pulled up to the emergency entrance, Minho was out before it fully stopped. He strode through automatic doors with the intensity of a man on a mission, his presence commanding immediate attention from the staff. "Where is Serena John?" His voice carried across the waiting area. The nurse at the desk looked up, took in his disheveled tuxedo and fierce expression, and quickly checked her computer. "She's in delivery room 3. But, sir, only family members are allowed." "I'm the father," Minho interrupted, already moving toward the double doors that led to the delivery wing. The nurse called after him about visitor protocols, but he ignored her, following the signs and his instincts until he found room 3. Through the small window, he could see Serena on the bed, her face contorted with pain, her curvy body covered in a hospital gown, medical staff surrounding her with focused efficiency. He pushed through the door without permission. Serena's eyes found his immediately, widening with shock that quickly morphed into anger and something that looked like relief. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was strained, breathless from contractions. A nurse tried to stop him. "Sir, you can't be in here during active labor unless you're—" "He's the father," Serena said quietly, and the admission cost her something. The medical staff exchanged glances but didn't argue further. Minho moved to her side, his hand finding hers instinctively. She tried to pull away, but another contraction hit, and her fingers clamped down on his with crushing strength. He didn't flinch, just held her through it, his other hand brushing sweat-dampened curls from her forehead with a tenderness that contradicted his ruthless reputation. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was low, meant only for her. "You didn't want me anymore, remember?" Serena's eyes held 8 months of pain. "You made that very clear. That's not true. Then why? Why did you leave? Why did you ask for the divorce? Why did you let me think you stopped loving me?" "Because someone was threatening you," he said roughly. "Photos of you, messages about what they'd do to you. I thought if you weren't my wife anymore, if you were no longer connected to me, you'd be safe." Her eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with physical pain. "So you pushed me away to protect me? Like I'm some damsel who can't handle your world? Like I didn't promise to stand by you through everything when we got married the first time?" Another contraction cut off his response. The doctor called out instructions, something about dilation and pushing and it being almost time. Minho stayed exactly where he was, holding Serena's hand, anchoring her through the pain, silently vowing that he would never leave her side again. "You shouldn't be here," she gasped when the contraction passed. "You have a wedding to finish." "I walked out," Minho said simply, "left Ji-eun at the altar. My mother is probably hiring assassins as we speak." "You what?" Serena stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "I chose you," he said fiercely. "I should have chosen you 8 months ago. I should have told you the truth and let you decide if you wanted to stay. Instead, I made decisions for you like an arrogant fool. I'm sorry, Serena. I'm so sorry." The doctor interrupted their moment, announcing it was time to push. What followed was chaos and pain and the most terrifying hour of Minho's life. He'd faced hostile board members and dangerous competitors without breaking a sweat, but watching Serena struggle to bring their child into the world, seeing her in pain and being unable to fix it, nearly broke him. He whispered encouragement in Korean and English, promised her everything would be okay, told her she was the strongest person he'd ever known. When she screamed at him that this was all his fault and she was never letting him touch her again, he took it without complaint because she was right. When she squeezed his hand hard enough to cut off circulation, he didn't make a sound. And when the baby's first cry filled the room, he felt something crack open in his chest that had been locked away his entire life. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the tiny, perfect creature on Serena's chest. "She's healthy. Strong lungs." Minho stared at his daughter, this impossible miracle with dark, curly hair already visible, skin a beautiful blend of both her parents, tiny fists waving in protest at being removed from her warm cocoon. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, and he'd never felt more terrified or more complete in his entire life. Serena was crying, laughing, touching their daughter with shaking hands. "Look at her," she whispered. "Minho, look at what we made." He couldn't speak past the emotion clogging his throat, so he just pressed his lips to Serena's forehead, then carefully touched one finger to his daughter's impossibly small hand. She gripped it immediately, her strength surprising for something so tiny, and Minho was lost completely. Later that night, after the medical staff had cleaned and weighed the baby, after Serena had been moved to a recovery room, after visiting hours had technically ended but no one dared tell Kang Minho to leave, he sat in a chair beside Serena's bed watching her sleep. Their daughter, still unnamed, slept in a bassinet nearby. Minho had held her for an hour, terrified he'd break something so fragile, awed by every tiny sound and movement. Now he divided his attention between the two females who'd completely wrecked his organized life, and he'd never been more grateful for anything. His phone had been vibrating constantly. His mother, his assistant, Ji-eun's father, board members, he'd ignored them all. Nothing mattered except this room, these two people, this second chance he absolutely didn't deserve. Serena stirred, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment, she seemed disoriented. Then her gaze found the bassinet, and relief flooded her features. "She's okay?" "More than okay," Minho said softly. "She's perfect, just like her mother." "Don't," Serena's voice held warning. "Don't what? Don't act like this changes everything. Don't pretend we can just go back to how things were. It does change everything." Minho leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "And we can't go back because I don't want what we had before. I want something better. Something honest." He paused. "I want you to marry me again. Are you insane?" Serena's eyes widened. "You literally left another woman at the altar today. You think I'm going to just fall into your arms because you showed up at the hospital?" "I think," Minho said carefully, "that you're angry and hurt, and you have every right to be. I think I destroyed your trust, and I'll spend the rest of my life earning it back if you let me. I think you never stopped loving me any more than I stopped loving you, and I think our daughter deserves to have both her parents in her life, together, not navigating custody arrangements and separate households." "That's not a reason to get married," Serena argued, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's not the only reason," he agreed. "The main reason is that I love you so much it physically hurts to be away from you. The past 8 months have been torture. I've been protecting you from a distance, watching over you without you knowing, going slowly insane because I couldn't touch you or talk to you or just exist in the same space as you. And now I find out you were carrying my child through all of it, facing pregnancy alone because I was too stupid to trust you with the truth." Their daughter made a small sound in her sleep. Both parents immediately looked toward the bassinet, then back at each other. "You really walked out on your wedding?" Serena asked quietly. "Left 200 guests and a bride at the altar?" Without hesitation, Minho confirmed. "The moment I heard you were in labor, nothing else mattered. My mother is furious. The business merger with Ji-eun's family is dead. I'll probably lose several board members over the scandal. But Serena, I'd do it again in a heartbeat because you are worth more than all of it combined." She studied his face, looking for lies and finding only raw honesty. "The threats against me, are they still active?" He'd been dreading this question. "Yes, but I've tripled security. No one will get close to you or our daughter. I'm not hiding you away this time. I'm keeping you close and daring anyone to try something." Serena was quiet for a long moment, her hand resting on her stomach where their daughter had lived for 9 months. "I can't do this again, Minho. I can't survive you leaving me twice, so don't make promises you can't keep. Don't say you'll stay if there's any chance you'll change your mind and decide I'm better off without you. I won't survive it." Her voice broke on the last words. "I'm not leaving," he said fiercely, standing and moving to sit on the edge of her bed. "I'm never leaving again. You want to know why I'm so certain? Because for 8 months I tried to live without you and I failed miserably. I was going through the motions, building my empire, making money, checking all the boxes society expected, and I was dead inside. You make me human, Serena. You make me feel things I didn't know I was capable of feeling. You challenge me and frustrate me and make me want to be better than I am." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears. "You also make me happy in a way I've never been happy before. When I'm with you, the world makes sense. When I'm without you, everything is gray and meaningless. So no, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me whether you like it or not. What about your mother? Serena asked. She hates me. My mother will learn to accept you or she'll lose her son and granddaughter, Minho said flatly. I'm done letting other people dictate my life. I'm done choosing duty over love. I'm 32 years old and I've spent my entire life being who everyone else needed me to be. I want to be who you need me to be instead. And what's that? She whispered. Yours, he said simply. Just yours. The kiss was inevitable. Minho leaned down and captured Serena's mouth with 8 months of longing and regret and desperate love. She melted into it despite her reservations, her hands fisting in his rumpled dress shirt, pulling him closer. He was careful of her post-delivery body, gentle when everything in him wanted to devour her, but the emotion behind the kiss was absolutely fierce. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Serena's eyes were dazed. We have to name her, she said, changing the subject because the intensity between them was too much, too fast. Do you have any ideas? Minho settled beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, both of them looking at their sleeping daughter. I was thinking Naomi. It works in both our cultures, means pleasantness in Hebrew, beautiful in Japanese, and it sounds lovely in Korean. Serena smiled. I like it. Naomi Kang, our little miracle. They sat like that for another hour, talking quietly about everything and nothing. Minho told her about the threats in detail this time, not hiding anything, explaining his thought process and acknowledging how badly he'd handled it. Serena told him about the pregnancy, how she'd found out the day after he asked for the divorce, how she'd been too hurt and angry to tell him, how she'd spent months trying to figure out how to co-parent with a man who'd shattered her heart. They talked about logistics, about where she'd live because her small apartment wasn't suitable for a baby, about security arrangements, about his mother's inevitable interference. When Serena started falling asleep mid-conversation, exhausted from labor and emotion, Minho carefully extracted himself from the bed and pulled a blanket over her. He spent the rest of the night in the chair, watching his 2 girls sleep, making plans and promises to himself about the life he was going to build for them. The next morning brought chaos in the form of Minho's mother. She swept into the hospital room like an avenging angel in Chanel, her expression promising violence. Song Ji-eun's family is threatening to sue for breach of contract and emotional damages. The board is calling for an emergency meeting. You've made us the laughingstock of Seoul's business community. Her eyes finally landed on the bassinet. And this is the reason you destroyed your future? Minho stood slowly, his body language protective as he positioned himself between his mother and Serena's bed. This is my daughter, your granddaughter. Show some respect. His voice carried warning. His mother's face softened slightly as she looked at the sleeping baby, but her spine remained steel. I warned you about getting involved with that woman. She's completely unsuitable for our family. She has no connections, no background, no understanding of our world. Actually, Serena's voice came from the bed, drawing everyone's attention. I have a degree in international business from Lagos Business School. I speak 4 languages fluently. I worked in corporate finance before your son decided I was better off divorced, and I've been navigating your world just fine, despite everyone treating me like I'm too stupid or too foreign to understand what's happening around me. She sat up carefully, her natural curls wild around her face, her body still recovering but her eyes blazing. So no, Mrs. Kang, I may not be Korean, and I may not come from money, but I'm not nothing. And your son seems to think I'm worth ruining his reputation for, so maybe reevaluate your definition of suitable. Minho had never been more attracted to her than in that moment, watching her face down his formidable mother without flinching. His mother was quiet for a long beat, reassessing. Finally, she moved closer to the bassinet, looking down at Naomi with an expression that was difficult to read. She has the Kang family nose, she said quietly, and her grandmother's eyes. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Minho knew his mother well enough to recognize this as her version of acceptance. She won't have an easy life, his mother continued. The press will tear her apart for being mixed. Seoul society can be cruel to anyone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. Then we'll teach her to be stronger than their cruelty, Minho said firmly. We'll raise her to be proud of both her heritages, to know her worth regardless of what small-minded people think. And anyone who has a problem with my daughter will have to go through me first. His mother's lips twitched in what might have been approval. You're your father's son, after all. He would have liked her. She gestured toward Serena. Your father always did admire people with spine. Then she turned and walked toward the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. I'll handle the board and the Song family. You focus on your actual family. But Minho, she looked back over her shoulder, don't expect me to make this easy for either of you. You'll both have to prove yourselves. With that, she swept out as dramatically as she'd entered. Serena let out a breath she'd been holding. That went better than expected? Minho laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. That was her giving her blessing. In her own terrifying way, she just told us she'll support this. He returned to Serena's bedside. Are you okay? That was intense. I'm fine, Serena said, but her hands were shaking slightly. Your mother is absolutely terrifying. Runs in the family, he said lightly, catching her hands in his. But you held your own beautifully. I meant what I said, you know. About not being nothing. I know. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. I've always known your worth, Serena. I'm sorry I made you doubt it. They were interrupted by a nurse bringing Naomi for feeding. Minho watched Serena navigate breastfeeding with a mixture of awe and fierce protectiveness. This woman had carried his child for 9 months alone, had faced labor without him, was now learning to be a mother without anyone to help her, and she was doing it all with grace and strength that humbled him. He'd been operating companies and making billion-one decisions since his 20s, but watching Serena feed their daughter, he realized he'd never truly understood responsibility until this moment. Over the next few days, Minho barely left the hospital. He worked from Serena's room, taking calls in the hallway when necessary, delegating tasks he'd normally handle personally. His assistant brought changes of clothes and meals from Serena's favorite Nigerian restaurant. Security was stationed outside the room in 8-hour shifts. When Serena pointed out that he was drawing attention with his constant presence, he simply said, "Let them talk. I don't care about optics anymore. I care about you and Naomi." By the 3rd day, they'd fallen into a routine that felt dangerously domestic. Minho would hold Naomi while Serena showered. They'd watch movies on her hospital television, arguing about everything from plot holes to character motivations. He'd tell her stories about board meetings and difficult negotiations, and she'd tell him about pregnancy symptoms he'd missed and baby books she'd read in preparation. The discharge day arrived too quickly. Serena had arranged to go back to her small apartment, but Minho had other plans. I had your things moved, he said casually while packing up the hospital room. Moved where? Serena's voice was suspicious. To my penthouse. Our penthouse, he corrected. The master bedroom has an adjoining nursery. I had it decorated while you were sleeping yesterday. Minho, we talked about this. You can't just make decisions for me. I'm not making decisions for you. He set down the bag he was holding and turned to face her. I'm offering you and our daughter a safe, secure place to live with round-the-clock security and everything you could possibly need. But if you genuinely want to go back to your apartment, if you want to do this alone, I'll respect that. I'll just be camped outside your door because there's no way I'm letting you out of my sight. Serena looked at him, then at Naomi sleeping peacefully in her carrier, then back at him. This doesn't mean we're getting back together. I'm still angry at you. I'm still hurt. Understood, Minho said immediately. You set the pace. I'm just asking you to let me be close enough to prove I've changed, to prove I'm worth a second chance. She sighed, a sound caught between exasperation and reluctant affection. Fine, but I get my own bedroom. Of course, he agreed, even though the thought of her sleeping in a different room made his chest ache. Whatever you need. They went home together in Minho's car, security following in a separate vehicle. The penthouse was exactly as Serena remembered. All modern lines and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Seoul's skyline. But Minho had made changes. The guest room was now a nursery painted in soft yellows and greens, filled with every baby item imaginable. He'd converted his home office into a second bedroom for Serena, complete with an ensuite bathroom and a sitting area. It's too much, Serena said, overwhelmed. It's not enough, Minho countered, but it's a start. That evening, they navigated the awkwardness of living together but not being together. Minho ordered dinner from 5 different restaurants, so Serena could choose what she wanted. He hovered while she fed Naomi, clearly wanting to help but not knowing how. When Naomi started crying inconsolably around midnight, they both stumbled into the nursery, exhausted and confused, trying to figure out what she needed. It took an hour and multiple attempts before they realized she just wanted to be held. Minho walked the penthouse with her tucked against his chest, humming old Korean lullabies his own mother had sung, while Serena watched from the doorway with an expression he couldn't quite read. By the end of the first week, they'd fallen into a rhythm. Minho worked from home, taking meetings in his office while Serena handled Naomi's feeding schedule. They had coffee together every morning, talking about everything except the massive elephant in the room that was their relationship status. Minho's mother visited twice, each time staying longer and being marginally less terrifying. She brought traditional Korean herbs for Serena's recovery and expensive baby clothes that Naomi would grow out of in weeks. On her second visit, she actually held her granddaughter, and Serena saw something soft in the older woman's eyes that made her understand where Minho had learned to hide his emotions behind walls. The turning point came during the third week. Serena was in the living room with Naomi when she heard voices from Minho's office, his and someone else's, angry and escalating. She moved closer, not intending to eavesdrop but unable to help herself. "If you don't fix this disaster, the shareholders will vote you out," a man's voice said. "You abandoned your wedding. You embarrassed the Song family. You're living in sin with a woman who isn't your wife. The optics are terrible." "I don't care about optics," Minho's voice was steel. "My daughter and her mother are my priority. Everything else is secondary. You're throwing away decades of carefully built reputation for what? A woman who has no place in our world? A mixed-race child who'll never be accepted?" The sound of a fist hitting wood made Serena jump. "You'll never speak about my daughter or Serena that way again." Minho's voice was lethal. "In fact, you'll never speak to me again, period. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." "But Minho," the man sputtered, "I've been with this company for 20 years. You can't just—" "Watch me," Minho said. The conversation was clearly over. Serena heard footsteps and quickly retreated to the living room, her heart pounding. She'd known Minho was risking his business reputation for her, but hearing it laid out so explicitly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. He was sacrificing everything he'd built, the empire he'd inherited from his father, all for her and Naomi. The weight of that sacrifice was crushing. That evening, after Naomi was asleep, Serena found Minho on the terrace overlooking the city. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his shoulders tight with tension. "I heard you fire someone today," she said quietly, joining him at the railing. "He deserved it." Minho's voice was flat. "No one talks about my family that way. Your family being me and Naomi," she clarified. He turned to look at her, his eyes intense. "You and Naomi are my only family that matters. Everyone else is just background noise. Minho, you can't keep sacrificing your business for us." "Yes, I can," he said simply, "and I will, as many times as necessary. But what if you lose everything? What if the board really votes you out? What if all of this is for nothing?" He caught her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the fierce emotion in his eyes. "Listen to me carefully, Serena. I've already lost everything once when I let you walk away. Money, I can make back. Companies, I can rebuild. Reputation, I can repair. But you and Naomi, you're irreplaceable. If I have to choose between my empire and my family, I'll choose family every single time." She felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I don't want you to resent us. I don't want you to wake up one day and realize you gave up too much." "Impossible." His thumbs brushed away the tears that had started falling. "You want to know what I realized when I was standing at that altar? I realized that I'd already given up everything important when I divorced you. I was walking through life like a ghost, checking boxes and making money and achieving goals, but I wasn't living. You make me live, Serena. You and Naomi make everything worth it." The kiss happened naturally this time. No audience, no pressure, just the two of them, and the Seoul skyline witnessing something shift between them. When they finally pulled apart, Serena rested her forehead against his chest. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "Scared you'll change your mind. Scared I'll let myself love you completely and you'll break me again." "I know." Minho's arms came around her, holding her close. "And I'll spend however long it takes proving those fears are unfounded. I'll prove it with actions, not just words. I'll prove it every single day until you believe me." They stood like that for a long time, the city breathing below them, both of them holding on to each other like drowning people clinging to life rafts. When they finally went back inside, something had changed. The walls between them had started crumbling, brick by careful brick. The next month was a study in slow-burn intimacy. Minho started small, bringing Serena coffee exactly how she liked it every morning, taking over Naomi's night feedings so Serena could sleep, listening when she talked about her day, her fears, her dreams for their daughter. He learned her rhythms, the way she hummed when she was content, the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, the way she lit up when Naomi smiled. Serena watched him transform from the closed-off CEO she'd married into someone softer, more open. He laughed more. He talked about his own fears, his worries about being a good father, his struggles with his mother and the board. He was vulnerable in ways he'd never been before, and that vulnerability was more attractive than any display of power. One evening, Serena found Minho asleep in the nursery, still in his work clothes, with Naomi asleep on his chest. He'd been up all night with her while Serena recovered from a cold, had gone straight to an early morning board meeting, and had come home to take over baby duty again without complaint. She watched them from the doorway, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. This man had walked away from a wedding for them, had fired executives who disrespected them, had rearranged his entire life around their needs. And he did it all without asking for anything in return, without demanding gratitude or recognition, just quietly loving them in every way he knew how. She thought about the woman in the emerald dress at the gala 8 months ago, the one who'd believed love meant pain and abandonment. That woman seemed like a stranger now. Minho had shown her that love could also mean sacrifice and service, and showing up even when it was hard. She was still scared, still carried wounds that hadn't fully healed, but she was also starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Later that night, after Minho had woken up and they'd shared dinner in comfortable silence, Serena made a decision. She found him in his bedroom, where he'd been giving her space, sleeping alone despite sharing a home. They needed to talk, truly talk, about what happened next. Minho was at his desk reviewing contracts when she knocked. He looked up immediately, concern flickering across his features. "Is everything okay? Is Naomi?" "She's fine," Serena interrupted. "I need to ask you something. Anything." He set down his pen, giving her his complete attention. "What do you want from me? From us?" The question hung in the air between them. "I want everything," Minho said after a moment, his honesty stark. "I want to marry you again. I want us to be a real family. I want to watch Naomi grow up together. I want to give her siblings eventually. I want to grow old with you. I want mornings and nights and all the mundane moments in between." He paused. "But I'll take whatever you're willing to give me. If you only want to co-parent, I'll accept that. If you want separate lives with shared custody, I'll survive it. Whatever you need, Serena, I'm here." She moved closer, her heart hammering. "What if I want everything too?" She watched hope bloom in his eyes. "But I need to know this is real. I need to know you won't wake up one day and decide I'm better off without you again. I need guarantees, Minho. I need you to promise me that when things get hard, and they will get hard, you'll talk to me instead of making decisions for me." Minho stood, crossed to her in 3 strides. "I promise." His voice was fierce. "I promise to communicate. I promise to trust you with the hard things. I promise to choose us every single day, even when it costs me, especially when it costs me." He dropped to one knee right there in his bedroom, pulling a ring box from his desk drawer. "I've been carrying this for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. But there's never going to be a perfect moment, so I'm just going to ask. Serena John, will you marry me? Again? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you? Will you build this impossible, beautiful life with me?" She looked down at him, this powerful man on his knees asking for her love, and felt the last of her walls crumble. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." The ring was different from her first one, more understated but somehow more meaningful. He slid it onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and kissed her with 8 months of longing and loss and love finally unleashed. When they broke apart, Serena was laughing and crying simultaneously. "We're insane," she said. "We're doing this all backward. We had a baby before figuring out if we could make the relationship work. That's how you know it's meant to be." Minho said, brushing tears from her cheeks. We're too stubborn to do anything the conventional way. That night, Serena moved her things into Minho's bedroom. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because sleeping in separate rooms when they were building a life together felt wrong. They lay tangled together, talking until dawn about wedding plans and the future and all the dreams they'd set aside during their time apart. When Naomi's cry interrupted them, just as the sun was rising, they both went to the nursery together, working as a team to handle their daughter's needs. It was exhausting and messy and absolutely perfect. The wedding happened 6 weeks later in Minho's mother's garden, small and intimate with only family and closest friends. Serena wore a dress that honored both her Nigerian heritage and Korean tradition. Minho couldn't stop staring at her like she was a miracle he didn't deserve. When the officiant asked if he took Serena to be his wife, Minho's answer was immediate and absolute. I do. Now and forever. Their vows were personal and raw. Minho promised to never push her away again, to trust her with his fears, to build a partnership instead of making unilateral decisions. Serena promised to believe in his love, even when her insecurities screamed otherwise, to communicate instead of assuming the worst, to build this life together one day at a time. When they kissed as husband and wife again, Naomi made a sound from where Minho's mother held her, and everyone laughed. The reception was joy personified. Minho's business partners who'd stood by him through the scandal toasted to love conquering all obstacles. Serena's friends from Nigeria video called their congratulations. Even Minho's mother gave a speech about how sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places, and her son had been smart enough to recognize that. That evening, after guests had left and Naomi was asleep with her grandmother babysitting, Minho carried Serena over the threshold of their bedroom. She laughed, protesting that this was technically their second wedding and they already lived here. Humor me, he said, setting her down gently. I want to do at least one traditional thing. What he did next wasn't traditional at all. He worshipped her with his hands and mouth, learning her body all over again, discovering how it had changed after carrying their daughter. Every curve, every stretch mark, every sign of what she'd endured alone. He told her she was beautiful, told her he loved her, told her thank you for giving him the greatest gifts of his life. When they finally came together, it was slow and reverent and absolutely consuming. Afterward, Serena lay in Minho's arms, listening to his heartbeat, feeling completely at peace for the first time in a year. I never thought we'd get here, she admitted quietly. Neither did I. Minho's fingers traced patterns on her bare shoulder. But I'm grateful every day that you gave me another chance, that you let me prove I could be better. You are better. She tilted her head to look at him. We both are. We're better together. They fell asleep, tangled around each other, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they'd face it as partners. The next morning, they woke to Naomi's cries and Minho's mother's voice calling that the baby was hungry. They dressed quickly, laughing at the chaos of new parenthood and married life colliding. This was their reality now, beautiful and messy and absolutely perfect. 3 months later, Minho stood in a board meeting defending his position as CEO. Some shareholders still questioned his judgment after the wedding scandal. He listened to their concerns without defensiveness, then pulled up a presentation showing quarterly profits that exceeded projections by 30%. The company is thriving, he said calmly. Our reputation has recovered. New partnerships have formed specifically because I demonstrated that family comes before profit. That's the kind of leader people want to work with, someone with priorities that actually make sense. The room was silent. Then one by one, shareholders voted to keep him in his position. When he returned home that evening, Serena and Naomi were waiting. He told them about the meeting, about how everything had worked out, about how choosing love over duty had somehow made him better at his job, not worse. That's because you're not divided anymore, Serena said wisely. You're not trying to be two different people. You're just yourself, integrated and whole. Minho pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling Naomi's small hand grab his thumb. A year ago, I was standing at an altar about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Today, I have everything I never knew I needed. How did I get this lucky? You didn't get lucky, Serena corrected. You made a choice. You chose us when it would have been easier to choose your reputation. That's not luck. That's love. They stood together in their living room, their daughter between them, the Seoul skyline stretching beyond the windows. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside, a family that had been broken and rebuilt was writing their own story, one day at a time. 2 years later, Serena found herself standing in the same hospital where everything had changed, but this time she wasn't alone. Minho held her hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement in Korean and English, and didn't flinch when she squeezed his hand hard enough to leave bruises. When their son was born, Naomi was waiting with her grandmother to meet her baby brother. The little girl who'd been born into chaos now had a stable, loving family and a sibling to grow up with. Minho looked at his wife, his daughter, his son, and felt overwhelming gratitude for that phone call 2 years ago that had interrupted a wedding and changed everything. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst timing, he said to Serena later that night. Sometimes walking away from what's expected leads you exactly where you need to be. Serena smiled, exhausted but radiant. You know what the best part is? What's that? We get to do this forever, navigate the chaos, raise our babies, drive each other crazy, and choose each other every single day. Minho kissed her softly, carefully, reverently. Forever sounds perfect. And it was. Not perfect in the sense of easy or without challenges, but perfect in the way real love is perfect. Imperfect people choosing each other repeatedly, building something beautiful from broken pieces, proving that second chances exist for those brave enough to fight for them. The phone call that had shattered one wedding had ultimately built something far better. A real family founded on honesty, sacrifice, and love that conquered fear. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered.